Dr. Kate Sullivan pressed the final control, and space itself began to die. The last two sections of the gravity trap collapsed simultaneously, creating a gravitational implosion so powerful that it bent light and twisted time. 4,000 Zephyrian ships were crushed in an instant, their hulls compressed to the size of marbles before vanishing into the artificial black hole. The USS Defiance rode the gravitational shockwave like a surfer on a cosmic tsunami. Chief Engineer Matt Davis fired the engines at maximum power while the ship bucked and rolled through forces that should have torn it apart. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the vessel as hull stress reached critical levels. Hull integrity at 15%. Matt shouted over the screaming alarms. "If we hit anything else, we're done for." Navigation Officer Ryan Clark fought to keep the ship on course as gravity waves threw them toward the nebula's edge. His hands moved frantically over the controls, making split-second adjustments that kept them from being pulled back into the collapsing gravity field. Almost clear. 30 more seconds. Behind them, the Kepler Nebula was tearing itself apart. The artificial gravity wells had destabilized the entire region, creating a chain reaction that would make the area uninhabitable for 1,000 years. Gas clouds spiraled into the growing black hole, while reality itself seemed to scream in protest. Captain Jake Morrison watched the tactical display as the few surviving Zephyrian ships fled in panic. Of the mighty armada that had entered the nebula, less than 3,000 vessels remained. The rest had been destroyed by forces they could not understand or escape. Admiral Vextar stood on his damaged bridge and stared at the destruction in stunned silence. Half his flagship's systems were offline, and the proud Dominion's Edge looked like a broken toy. Around him, his surviving officers worked desperately to restore basic functions. "Admiral," Fleet Captain Zoran said quietly, "we must order a general retreat. The fleet is broken." For the first time in his military career, Vextar had no answer. The Zephyrian Empire had never faced a defeat like this. One human ship had destroyed the largest armada in galactic history, using weapons and tactics that defied everything he thought he knew about warfare. "Sir?" Zoran pressed. "Your orders?" Vextar looked at the tactical display showing his scattered, demoralized forces. Many ship commanders were already falling back without orders, their crews too terrified to continue fighting. "Signal all ships," he said finally. "Full retreat to the outer system." But Captain Morrison was not finished with them yet. The Defiance emerged from the collapsing nebula, traveling at near light speed, its hull glowing white-hot from friction with exotic particles. The ship looked like a falling star as it streaked toward the fleeing Zephyrian fleet. "They're trying to escape," Commander Alex Turner reported from his tactical station. "Should we let them go?" Jake studied the enemy formation. The surviving ships were scattered and disorganized, their morale completely shattered. But if he let them escape, they would return with reinforcements. Other colonies would face the same threat that had brought them here. "No," Jake said firmly. "We finish this now. Nicole, prepare our last quantum torpedoes. Target their flagship." Weapons Officer Nicole Roberts checked her displays. "Only 6 torpedoes remaining, Captain. If we miss this shot, we won't get another chance." "Then we don't miss." The Defiance accelerated toward the Dominion's Edge in what appeared to be a suicidal attack run. The massive Zephyrian flagship was 10 times larger than the human vessel, with enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But size meant nothing when your enemy could think faster than you could react. "Admiral." Vextar watched the human ship approach and felt something break inside his mind. "All weapons, concentrate fire on that vessel. Destroy it." The Dominions. Edge unleashed everything it had. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and missile swarms filled space with deadly energy. The barrage was so intense that it lit up the darkness like a new sun. No ship should have been able to survive such overwhelming firepower, but Ryan Clark was no ordinary pilot. He guided the Defiance through the weapon's fire with impossible skill, using micro-adjustments to slip between energy beams by mere meters. The ship danced through the deadly light show like it was performing a ballet. "Impossible," Vextar whispered. "Nothing can fly through that much fire." Nicole waited until they were less than 2 kilometers from the enemy flagship before firing. 6 quantum torpedoes shot out at point-blank range, their exotic matter warheads glowing with contained destruction. At this distance, there was no way to miss. The torpedoes struck the Dominion's edge along its central hull, punching through shields that had never failed before. The explosions tore massive holes in the flagship's armor and sent shockwaves through its entire structure. Power systems failed throughout the ship as secondary explosions rippled along its length. Direct hits. Nicole shouted with fierce satisfaction. The Dominion's edge began to list to one side, its engines sputtering and dying. Emergency lights flickered across its hull as damage control teams struggled to contain the destruction. A mighty flagship that had terrorized 100 worlds was now a helpless wreck. Admiral Vextar found himself on the deck of his bridge, blood running from a cut on his forehead. Around him, control panels sparked and smoked while his officers worked frantically to restore basic systems. "Damage report," he croaked. "Main engines are offline," Zoran reported. "Weapons systems destroyed. Life support failing on 12. Dex, sir, we need to surrender before they finish us off." The word surrender hit Vextar like a physical blow. No Zephyrian admiral had ever surrendered to an enemy. It was unthinkable, impossible, a violation of everything their empire stood for. But as he looked around his ruined bridge, Vextar realized he had no choice. The human ship was already positioning for another attack run, and his vessel could not defend itself. If he continued fighting, his entire crew would die for nothing. "Open a communication channel to the human ship," Vextar said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. On the Defiance, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake looked up from her station with surprise. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship." "Put it on screen," Jake ordered. Admiral Vextar appeared on the main view screen, his scaled face showing defeat and humiliation. Behind him, smoke drifted across his damaged bridge. "Human captain," he said slowly, "I am Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire. I formally surrender my fleet to you." A stunned silence filled the Defiance's bridge. No one had expected this moment. The mighty Zephyrian Empire, terror of the galaxy, was surrendering to a single human warship. Jake stood up from his captain's chair and faced the view screen. "Admiral, order your remaining ships to power down their weapons and withdraw from human space. If any Zephyrian vessel approaches our colonies again, we will consider it an act of war." "Understood," Vextar replied, his voice barely above a whisper dot, as news of the battle spread through galactic communication networks. Other species reacted with amazement and terror. The humans, who had been dismissed as primitive newcomers just days before, had achieved the impossible. They had faced the galaxy's greatest military power, and Ambassador Lisa Carter received the news while aboard the Federation flagship. The Galactic Council, which had abandoned humanity to save themselves, now scrambled to send congratulations and offers of alliance. Fear had replaced their previous dismissal. Captain Jake Morrison looked out at the stars and smiled. The age of humanity being pushed around by alien empires was over. They had earned their place in the galaxy, not through diplomacy or submission, but through courage and sacrifice. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans were most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. The massive gravity trap held 8,000 Zephyrian ships in its invisible grip. Admiral Vextar watched in horror as his mighty fleet spun helplessly through space like toys in a cosmic whirlpool. Ships that had conquered entire star systems now tumbled end over end, their engines screaming as they fought against forces they could not understand. "Engineering report!" Vextar shouted over the alarms filling his bridge. "Sir, we're caught in an artificial gravitational field," his chief engineer replied. "Our engines are at maximum power, but we're still being pulled toward the center of the distortion." Fleet Captain Zoran struggled to stay in his chair as the Dominion's edge shook violently. "Admiral, we have to order the free ships to retreat." "This is some kind of human trap." "Never!" Vextar roared. "The Zephyrian Empire does not retreat from inferior species." 4,000 ships remained outside the gravity trap, and Vextar ordered them to attack. Battle Group Commander Kreltox led 200 heavy cruisers in a desperate charge through the most dangerous parts of the nebula. He knew it was probably suicide, but his admiral had given clear orders. "All ships follow me," Kreltox broadcast. To his battle group, "We will avenge our trapped comrades." The Zephyrian cruisers plunged into the nebula's deadliest regions, where gravitational forces could tear apart any ship that made a single mistake. Within minutes, dozens of vessels were crushed by invisible forces or torn apart by tidal stress. But Kreltox pushed forward, determined to reach the human ship. On the USS Defiance, Chief Engineer Matt Davis watched his displays with growing alarm. Every system on the ship was running far beyond safe limits. The modified deflector array was consuming so much power that the fusion reactors were overheating. "Captain, we have critical overloads throughout the ship," Matt reported. "If we keep this up much longer, we're going to lose main power." Captain Jake Morrison looked at his tactical display. The gravity trap was working perfectly, but they were paying a terrible price for it. "How long can you hold it together?" "Maybe 10 more minutes before we start losing major systems." Jake turned to Dr. Kate Sullivan at her science station. "Kate, can you collapse the gravity field in sections? We need to destroy the trapped ships before our power fails." Kate's hands moved frantically over her controls. "I can try, but it's incredibly dangerous. If I lose control of the gravitational forces, it could tear apart everything in this system, including us." "Do it," Jake ordered. "We didn't come this far to give up now." Kate began the most complex scientific procedure ever attempted by a human. She carefully adjusted the artificial gravity wells, causing them to merge and collapse in controlled sequences. Each collapse created a devastating implosion that crushed dozens of trapped Zephyrian ships. The first section collapsed with a flash of light that could be seen across the entire nebula. 50 enemy vessels were instantly crushed to the size of basketballs, their hulls unable to withstand the enormous gravitational forces. The sound of tearing metal echoed through space as proud Zephyrian warships died. "Section 1 collapsed successfully," Kate reported. "Preparing Section 2. Admiral Vextar watched his ships die and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear, real, bone-deep terror that made his hands shake. How is this possible? How can one human ship do this to us? "Sir, perhaps we should consider retreat," Zoran suggested quietly. Vextar turned on his second-in-command with fury in his eyes. "Anyone who speaks of retreat will be executed for cowardice. We will destroy this human ship if it's the last thing we do." The Defiance appeared again on the sensors, moving through the nebula like a hunting shark. Navigation Officer Ryan Clark performed impossible maneuvers, using gravitational fields and gas clouds to hide their approach. The ship seemed to dance through space, avoiding enemy fire while positioning for another attack. "Target the command ships," Commander Alex Turner called out. "They're trying to reorganize the remaining forces." Weapons Officer Nicole Roberts locked onto 3 Zephyrian battleships that were attempting to coordinate the attack, firing quantum torpedoes. The torpedoes streaked through space and found their targets. The explosions destroyed 2 battleships instantly, while the third lost all power and drifted helplessly. Without their command ships, the remaining free Zephyrian forces began to panic. Kate collapsed the second section of the gravity trap, destroying another 100 enemy vessels. The gravitational distortions were becoming unstable, and she could feel the forces fighting against her control. Captain, the field is becoming harder to control. We need to finish this quickly. How many ships are still trapped? Jake asked. About 6,000, but they're spread across 3 more sections. Battle Group Commander Krilltox finally reached the Defiance's position with what remained of his cruisers. Less than 50 ships had survived the journey through the deadly nebula. All ships concentrate fire on that human vessel. The Zephyrian cruisers opened fire with everything they had. Plasma beams and particle cannons lit up the nebula as they tried to destroy the ship that had humiliated their empire. But the Defiance was ready for them. Ryan Clark spun the ship through a series of rolls and turns that pushed the crew against their restraints. Zephyrian weapons fire passed harmlessly through the space where they had been moments before. They can't hit what they can't predict. Nicole returned fire with surgical precision. Her quantum torpedoes found gaps in enemy formations and exploited every weakness in their shield configurations. Ship after ship exploded under her accurate fire until only a handful of Krelltox's S-Force remained. The third gravity section collapsed, taking another massive chunk of the Zephyrian fleet with it. Space itself seemed to scream as thousands of tons of metal were compressed into tiny spheres. The death cries of alien crews echoed across communication frequencies. Only 2 sections left, Kate reported, but her voice was strained with exhaustion. I don't know if I can hold the field stable much longer. Chief Davis's warning lights were flashing red throughout the engineering sections. Captain, we're losing containment in Reactor 2. If it goes critical, we'll lose half our power. Jake made a decision that would be remembered throughout human history. Kate, prepare to collapse both remaining sections at once. We're going to end this now. Sir, that could create a gravitational shockwave that destroys everything in the system, including us. Then we better make sure we're far enough away when it happens. Jake turned to Ryan. Plot us a course out of the nebula. Maximum speed. Kate's fingers trembled as she prepared the final collapse sequence. She was about to unleash forces that could tear apart the fabric of space itself. Gravitational implosion in 30 seconds. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake intercepted a priority transmission from the remaining Zephyrian ships. Captain, they're begging Admiral Vextar for permission to retreat. Their morale is completely broken. Jake felt no satisfaction in the enemy's terror. This was war, and war was ugly. But sometimes it was necessary to protect innocent people from those who would destroy them. 10 seconds to collapse, Kate announced. The USS Defiance accelerated toward the edge of the nebula as fast as its overtaxed engines could manage. Behind them, the final sections of the gravity trap prepared to crush the remainder of the Zephyrian armada. 5 seconds. Jake gripped his captain's chair and prepared for the end of the battle. One way or another, it would all be over soon. The Zephyrian armada entered the Kepler Nebula like a metal storm. 12,000 warships moved in tight formation, their hulls gleaming under the nebula's strange light. Admiral Vextar stood on his bridge and smiled as his sensors detected multiple human ship signatures scattered throughout the gas clouds. Pathetic, he said to his officers. The humans are trying to hide like frightened children. Begin the hunt. Fleet Captain Zoran looked worried as he studied the sensor readings. Admiral, something doesn't feel right. Why would one ship split into so many pieces? Because they're desperate, Vextar replied. Send Battle Group 7 to investigate the nearest contact. We'll destroy them one by one. Hidden deep in the nebula's thickest gas clouds, Captain Jake Morrison watched the enemy fleet on his tactical display. The Zephyrian ships looked like angry red dots swarming across his screen. Sarah, are they taking the bait? Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake nodded from her communication station. Yes, sir. They're sending ships to investigate our fake signatures. Perfect. Jake turned to his weapons officer. Nicole, are you ready? Weapons Officer Nicole Roberts had her hands hovering over her controls. All torpedo tubes loaded and ready, Captain. Just give me a target. Jake studied the enemy formation. The Zephyrian ships were spread out, but still close enough together for his plan to work. Target the command ships in the center of their formation. Fire when ready. Nicole pressed her controls, and 6 quantum torpedoes shot out from the Defiance. The weapons moved through the nebula like streaks of blue lightning, their exotic matter warheads glowing with deadly energy. The torpedoes reached the enemy formation in seconds and exploded against the shields of 3 Zephyrian destroyers. The explosions lit up the nebula like miniature suns. Brilliant white light flashed through the gas clouds, temporarily blinding every sensor in the area. The 3 enemy ships shook violently as their shields collapsed and their hulls cracked open. Direct hits. Nicole shouted with excitement. On the Dominion's edge, Admiral Vexstar roared with anger as his bridge lights flickered from the electromagnetic pulse. Find that ship. I want it destroyed immediately, but the Defiance was already gone. Chief. Engineer Matt Davis had activated the ship's silent running mode, shutting down all non-essential systems and using special engine modifications to hide their energy signature. The human warship slipped through the nebula like a ghost. Commander Alex Turner coordinated the attack from his tactical station. Captain, enemy Battle Group 7 is moving toward Probe Cluster 3. They'll discover its fake in approximately 4 minutes. Let them, Jake replied. Ryan, take us to position Delta. It's time for the second phase. Navigation Officer Ryan Clark skillfully guided the Defiance through the dangerous gravitational fields. His hands moved smoothly over the controls as he threaded the ship between gravity wells that would crush any vessel that got too close. Position Delta in 30 seconds, Captain. Dr. Kate Sullivan was ready at her science station. The modified deflector array hummed with barely contained energy, creating a strange vibration that could be felt throughout the ship. Captain, I'm detecting massive gravitational stress in the enemy formation. Their ships are having trouble maintaining course. Jake smiled grimly. Begin gravitational manipulation. Make them pay for coming here. Kate activated her experimental device, and the nebula around them began to change. Invisible forces reached out through space, grabbing at the Zephyrian ships like giant hands. The tightly packed enemy formation started to break apart as artificial gravity wells pulled vessels off course. Battle Group Commander Kreltox watched his navigation displays with growing alarm. Admiral, our ships are being affected by unknown gravitational forces. 3 cruisers have collided with each other. Impossible, Vexstar snarled. Gravity doesn't work that way. Tell that to the laws of physics, Fleet Captain Zoran muttered, but not loud enough for the Admiral to hear. The Defiance appeared again on the enemy sensors, this time attacking from a completely different direction. Nicole launched another spread of torpedoes at maximum range, targeting the command vessels that were struggling to maintain formation. The weapons found their marks, destroying 2 Zephyrian cruisers and damaging a battleship. They're using the nebula against us, Zoran reported. Our formation discipline is breaking down. Vexstar's eyes burned with rage. Then we go in after them. All ships pursue that human vessel into the densest part of the nebula. Sir, that could be exactly what they want us to do, Kreltox warned. I? Don't care what they want, Vexstar shouted. No single ship makes fools of the Zephyrian Empire. Lieutenant Ben Wright monitored the enemy communications from his station. Captain, they're taking the bait. Admiral Vexstar is ordering his entire fleet deeper into the nebula. Excellent, Jake replied. Kate, how long until you can activate the main gravity trap? Give me 5 more minutes to build up enough power, Kate answered. Sweat dripped down her face as she worked frantically at her controls. The energy requirements are enormous. I'm pulling power from everything except life support and engines. The lights on the bridge dimmed as more power flowed to the deflector array. Warning alarms sounded throughout the ship as systems operated far beyond their design limits. Sparks flew from control panels, and the air filled with the smell of burning electronics. The Defiance struck again, peering suddenly behind a group of Zephyrian battleships. Nicole's torpedoes tore through their rear shields, causing massive explosions that lit up the nebula. 2 ships were destroyed instantly, while a third spun out of control, its engines dead. Impossible! Admiral Vexstar screamed. How can one ship be in so many places at once? The answer was Lieutenant Wright's sensor probes, still broadcasting false signatures throughout the nebula. Every time the Zephyrians thought they had found the real Defiance, it turned out to be another fake contact. Meanwhile, the real ship moved freely through the chaos, striking when and where the enemy least expected. Ryan Clark performed a maneuver that would have been impossible in normal space. He used the gravitational fields to slingshot the Defiance around a massive gas cloud, bringing them into perfect position for Kate's final gambit. All enemy ships are now within the target zone, Ryan reported. Kate's fingers flew over her controls as she prepared to spring the trap. Power levels at maximum. Gravitational field generators online. All systems ready. Jake looked around his bridge at the crew who had followed him into this impossible situation. They were tired, scared, and facing certain death, but none of them had given up. Do it, Kate. Show these aliens what humans can do when they're pushed too far. Kate pressed the final control, and space itself began to scream. The nebula twisted and warped as artificial gravity wells merged into one massive distortion. The Zephyrian fleet, caught completely by surprise, found themselves trapped in a gravitational nightmare. Ships that had been in perfect formation moments before were now tumbling helplessly through space. The massive gravity pulled them toward its center like leaves in a whirlpool. Smaller vessels were crushed instantly, while larger ships fought desperately to escape the invisible forces tearing them apart. What's happening? Vexstar demanded, as his flagship shook violently. The humans have created some kind of gravity trap, Zoran replied, his voice filled with amazement and terror. Half our fleet is caught in it. On the Defiance, Jake watched the enemy ships struggle helplessly against forces they didn't understand. Now comes the hard part. Ryan, get us out of here before this whole nebula collapses. The real battle was just beginning. Admiral Vexstar stood on the bridge of his flagship Dominion's Edge and watched the stars ahead. The massive ship was 5 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy entire planets. Around him, 11,999 other Zephyrian warships moved in perfect formation through space. The Admiral was not happy about this mission. For 300 years, the Zephyrian Empire had conquered worlds and enslaved entire species. They were the most feared military force in the galaxy. Now they were being sent to crush one small human colony ship that had refused to surrender. Admiral, said Fleet Captain Zoran from the tactical station, we will reach the Kepler system in 18 hours. Should we prepare the battle formation? Vexstar waved his hand dismissively. His scaled green skin caught the light from the Yars. Bridge displays. One human ship does not require battle formation. We will simply destroy it and move on. Battle Group Commander Kreltox looked up from his station. Sir, our intelligence reports say this ship is called the Defiance. It's their newest warship with advanced weapons. Advanced human weapons, Maxstar laughed. Their technology is still centuries behind ours. This will be over in minutes. Meanwhile, deep inside the Kepler Nebula, the USS Defiance moved like a ghost through the swirling gases. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the engineering sections where his crew worked frantically to prepare their impossible plan. Dr. Kate Sullivan stood in front of a massive computer display showing the nebula's gravitational fields. The patterns looked like a three-dimensional spider web with bright spots marking the strongest gravity wells. Matt, I need you to reroute power from the life support backup systems to the deflector array. Chief Engineer Matt Davis wiped sweat from his forehead. Kate, if we lose life support, the crew will have maybe 6 hours of air. If this doesn't work, we won't need 6 hours, Kate replied grimly. Lieutenant Ben Wright ran between workstations carrying data tablets. Dr. Sullivan, I've finished programming the sensor probes. They can copy our ship's energy signature and broadcast it from 30 different locations. Kate smiled for the first time in hours. Perfect. That should confuse their targeting systems. Long enough for us to get into position. On the bridge, Commander Alex Turner studied tactical displays, while Captain Morrison looked over his shoulder. The screens showed dozens of small objects moving through the nebula. They looked like asteroids, but Alex knew they were something much more dangerous. The gravity fields are strongest here and here. Alex pointed to 2 bright spots on the knee. Display. If we can position the enemy fleet between these points, Dr. Sullivan thinks she can create an artificial gravity well that will trap them. Jake nodded slowly. How many ships can we trap? Maybe half their fleet if they come in standard formation. The problem is getting them to enter the nebula in the first place. Leave that to me, Jake said. A Zephyrian admiral won't be able to resist the chance to hunt us down personally. In the science lab, Kate worked with her team to modify equipment that was never meant to handle this kind of power. Sparks flew from control panels as they pushed every system beyond its design limits. The deflector array was meant to push small objects away from the ship. Now they were trying to turn it into a weapon that could affect gravity itself. The power flow is unstable, reported one of her technicians. If we're not careful, the whole array could explode. Then we'll be very careful, Kate said, continuing to work on the modifications. Navigation Officer Ryan Clark had spent the last 12 hours mapping every safe path through the nebula. The gravitational fields were constantly changing, making navigation extremely dangerous. One wrong turn could crush the Defiance like an empty can. I've found 17 routes we can use to move around without being detected, Ryan reported to Captain Morrison. But once Dr. Sullivan activates her gravity trap, most of these paths will become deadly. How long will we have to escape? Jake asked. Maybe 10 minutes before the whole nebula becomes too dangerous for any ship. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake monitored enemy communications from her station. The Zephyrian fleet was getting closer, and their transmissions revealed growing impatience from Admiral Vextar. Captain, the Zephyrians are arguing among themselves, Sarah reported. Some of their commanders think this is a trap, but Admiral Vextar is overruling them. Good, Jake said. Pride makes people stupid. Weapons Officer Nicole Roberts ran final checks on their quantum torpedoes. The Defiance carried 48 of the most advanced weapons humanity had ever built. Against 12,000 enemy ships, they would have to make every shot count. All weapons are ready, Captain, Nicole reported. I've programmed the torpedoes for maximum yield. Each one should be able to damage multiple targets if they're close together. How close? Jake asked. Less than 2 kilometers. That means we need them bunched up tight. 6 hours before the Zephyrian fleet arrived, Kate Sullivan completed her modifications to the deflector array. The massive dish now glowed with strange energy that made the air around it shimmer. Warning lights flashed throughout the ship as power systems struggled to handle the enormous energy requirements. "It's ready," Kate announced over the ship's communication system. "But I need to warn everyone. When I activate this device, it might tear our ship apart along with the enemy fleet." Jake's voice came back over the speakers. "Understood, Doctor. We knew the risks when we started this." The crew of the Defiance spent their final hours writing messages to families on Earth and checking their equipment one last time. Nobody talked about what would happen if their plan failed. They all knew the Zephyrians would show no mercy to anyone who had defied the Empire. Chief Davis gathered his engineering teams for final instructions. "When the shooting starts, keep those engines running no matter what. If we lose power, we're dead." Commander Turner briefed the tactical teams. "Remember, we only get one chance at this. Every shot has to count." Lieutenant Wright launched the sensor probes throughout the nebula. Soon 30 false images of the Defiance would appear on enemy screens, making it impossible for them to target the real ship dot. As the final hour approached, Captain Morrison called his senior officers to the bridge. Outside the view screen, the nebula's gases swirled peacefully, hiding the deadly trap they had prepared. "Are we ready?" Jake asked. "As ready as we'll ever be," Commander Turner replied. Sarah Blake looked up from her communication station. "Captain, I'm detecting the Zephyrian fleet on long-range sensors. They'll be here in 30 minutes. Jake nodded and sat down in his captain's chair. "All stations, prepare for combat. This is what we came here to do." The trap was set. Now they had to hope that human cleverness could triumph over impossible odds. In 30 minutes, they would find out if one ship could really face an entire armada and survive. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance and looked out at the stars. The massive warship moved slowly through the Kepler Nebula, its engines running quiet. The nebula was beautiful, with its purple and blue gases swirling around them like a cosmic storm. Jake had been a ship captain for 15 years, but this view never got old. The Defiance was humanity's newest and strongest warship. It was 1 kilometer long and carried 800 crew members. The ship had the best weapons and shields that human engineers could build. Jake was proud to command it, but today he felt worried about something he could not name. Lieutenant. Commander Sarah Blake turned from her communication station. Her face looked serious as she walked toward Jake. "Captain, we have an incoming message from the Federation flagship. Ambassador Lisa Carter wants to speak with you right away." Jake nodded and straightened his uniform. Ambassador Carter was one of the most important people in human space. If she wanted to talk, it had to be something big. Put her through on the main screen. The view screen flickered and showed a middle-aged woman with short brown hair and tired eyes. Lisa Carter looked like she had not slept in days. Behind her, Jake could see the bridge of the Eternal Harmony, the Federation's largest diplomatic ship. "Captain Morrison," Lisa said. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the worry in it. "I need to come aboard your ship immediately. I have information that affects all of humanity." "Of course, Ambassador. We will prepare a docking bay for your shuttle." 20 minutes later, Lisa Carter stood in the Defiance's main conference room. With her were Jake's senior officers. Commander Alex Turner sat at the tactical station, his fingers dancing over computer controls as he checked ship systems. Dr. Kate Sullivan, the chief science officer, had her tablet ready to take notes. Chief Engineer Matt Davis looked up from his repair reports. Lisa took a deep breath before she spoke. 3 days ago, the Zephyrian Empire sent an ultimatum to Earth and the Galactic Federation Council. She paused and looked at each officer. They want humanity to give up all our colonies outside the Sol system. They want us to return to Earth and never leave again. Commander Turner looked up sharply. That's impossible. We have 12 million people living on our outer colonies. We can't just abandon them. The Zephyrians don't care, Lisa replied. They say humans are spreading too fast through the galaxy. They call us a virus that needs to be contained. Dr. Sullivan leaned forward. What happens if we refuse their demand? Lisa's face went pale. They will destroy every human colony and ship outside the Sol system. Then they will attack Earth itself. She touched her tablet, and the conference room's main screen showed. Star map. They have assembled the largest military force in galactic history. 12,000 warships, including their most powerful dreadnoughts. The room went silent. Jake stared at the numbers on the screen. 12,000 ships against humanity's total fleet of maybe 300 vessels. It was not even a fair fight. There's more, Lisa continued. The Federation Council met yesterday. They voted to abandon humanity completely. They're too afraid of the Zephyrian Empire to help us. Chief Davis slammed his hand on the table. Those cowards. We helped them fight the sector wars. We shared our technology with them. Fear makes people do terrible things, Lisa said sadly. The Federation believes that if they give the Zephyrians what they want, the Empire will leave the rest of the galaxy alone. Jake studied the star map. The Zephyrian fleet was gathering near the Kepler system, only 2 days away from the nearest human colonies. How long do we have? The ultimatum expires in 1 week. After that, they begin their attack. Lisa looked directly at Jake. I've been ordered to tell all human ships to return to Earth immediately. We are going to surrender. No. The word came out of Jake's mouth before he could stop it. Everyone in the room turned to look at him. I won't abandon our people to those monsters. Commander Turner stood up. Captain, I understand how you feel, but we can't fight 12,000 ships with one vessel. Maybe we can't win, Jake said, but we can make them pay for every life they take. Dr. Sullivan was studying something on her tablet. She looked up with excitement in her eyes. Captain, there might be another option. I've been studying the Kepler Nebula for weeks. There are unusual gravitational fields here, stronger than anything we've seen before. What kind of gravitational fields? Jake asked. The kind that could be dangerous to large fleets if they don't know what they're doing. Kate's fingers moved quickly over her tablet. If we could somehow trap the Zephyrian fleet in these fields. Chief Davis shook his head. That's crazy talk, Doc. Even if we could do something like that, we'd probably destroy ourselves in the process. Probably, Kate agreed, but it might be our only chance. Jake looked around the room at his officers. These people had followed him through dangerous missions before. They trusted him, and he trusted them. What would you need to make this work? Kate pulled up technical diagrams on the main screen. I would need to modify our deflector array to create artificial gravity wells. It's never been tried before, and the power requirements would be enormous. How long? Jake asked. Maybe 12 hours if everything goes perfectly. Lisa Carter stood up. Captain Morrison, I can't officially support this plan. Earth Command has ordered all ships to return home. Jake smiled grimly. Then it's a good thing we're having communication problems out here in the nebula. Our long-range transmitters must be damaged. Sarah Blake grinned from her communication station. Very damaged, Captain. I don't think we'll be able to receive any messages for quite a while. Lisa nodded slowly. I understand. If anyone asks, I'll tell them the Defiance was lost with all hands in a nebula storm. Thank you, Ambassador. Jake turned to his officers. We all know what we're facing. If anyone wants to take a shuttle back to Earth, now is the time. Nobody moved. Commander Turner spoke for all of them. Where you go, we go, Captain. Jake felt pride swell in his chest. Then let's get to work. Kate, start modifying that deflector array. Alex, I want every weapon system checked and ready. Matt, give me everything the engines can handle. Sarah, monitor all Zephyrian communications. As his officers left to begin their preparations, Jake stayed behind with Lisa. The ambassador looked worried but determined. You know this is probably suicide, she said quietly. Maybe, Jake replied. But someone has to make a stand. Someone has to show the galaxy that humans don't give up when things get hard. Lisa nodded and shook his hand. Good luck, Captain. I'll make sure Earth knows what you tried to do here. After Lisa left, Jake stood alone on the bridge. Outside, the view screen, the Kepler Nebula swirled with its beautiful and deadly gases. In 2 days, the most powerful military force in the galaxy would arrive here expecting to find empty space dock. Instead, they would find one human warship and a crew that refused to surrender. Jake smiled as he gave the order to begin preparations. The Zephyrians had no idea what they were about to face.